Climbing the organizational leadership ladder is in the back of the mind of most leaders. Most leaders aim to be promoted in order to impact more people around them. However, the problem which they face is how to be promoted without coming across as self-centered and egotistical. My guest, Ron Carucci, and I discuss how new leaders can prepare themselves the best to become senior executives, where leaders fail in their development to become senior executives, how middle leaders can prepare themselves to move to the next level, and what advice he has for someone preparing to be interviewed for those senior levels. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 69, Rising Through the Leadership Ladder with Ron Carucci. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you here. It's your host and founder and your leadership coach, Scott McCarthy, and I am happy to hear that you're here listening to my podcast yet again. This show is all about one thing and one thing only, and that is making you a better leader. So if you find yourself wondering how to move forward in that leadership role, how to actually start off being a better leader, and ultimately, if you are already in a leadership role, how can you become a better leader? This show is all for you in all those different scenarios. So again, welcome, and it's great to have you here. Before we dive into today's episode with Ron, just got a couple of quick announcements regarding moving forward leadership, and that is, I guess, some seriously great things being worked on in the background right now, which aren't fully public yet. However, the group over at the Moving Forward Leadership Mastermind, and that being movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind, the free Facebook group that we have where we discuss all things leadership, they're starting to get snippets of what's soon to be coming down and available to everyone within Moving Forward Leadership, whether you're a podcast listener or if you follow the group or if you follow me on Facebook or any other social media. Soon there's going to be a brand new resource available to you all. However, those folks are getting a free, or getting made available to them, I should say, potentially a free look at what's coming down. So if you're not in the group, if you're not in the mastermind, if you're not talking moving leadership with me, and oh, by the way, most of the guests, you're missing out, and you're potentially going to be missing out on a great opportunity. So I would definitely recommend to you to join the mastermind at movingforwardleadership.com and come introduce yourself and talk leadership and be prepared to potentially get access to something coming down the pipe from me for free. All right. So that's all I got today by way of announcements. So today's episode is about, moving up the ranks. And I say most leaders, because not all leaders want to, climb that organizational leadership ladder. I don't say corporate ladder because there's 50 million different types of leaders and leaders out there. There isn't just corporate leaders. There are nonprofit leaders. There are governmental leaders. There's all kinds of different leaders that aren't necessarily just business, but large corporations. So I don't like the word corporate ladder. Instead, I prefer, in this sense, using organizational ladder. Anyway, most leaders out there do want to climb this ladder, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. And you need help from time to time. You need to learn from someone who's been there, who's done that. And Ron is definitely a person who's been there and done that. He's the co-founder and managing partner of Navalent, who works with CEOs and executives who are pursuing transformational change with their organizations, their leaders and industries. He's got a 30-year track record helping some of the world's most influential executives tackling challenges such as strategy, organization, and leadership. From startups to Fortune 10s, turnarounds, new market strategies, overhauling leadership and culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's worked in more than 25 countries, 4 continents, and he's a contributor to HBR, Forbes, Fortune, CEO, etc., etc. So, all to say, Ron knows his stuff, and he's helped people go from that middle-level leadership role to that senior executive, to that C-suite, to that boardroom. So, if you are that person, you want to get there someday, Maybe you're getting ready to make the jump now. Maybe it's in your 5-year plan. Maybe it's in your 10-year plan. Either way, or maybe it's not even in your plan at all. Either way, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Ron Carucci discussing how you, as a leader, can move through the leadership ladder. Ron, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Great to have you here.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I'm happy we were able to get this rescheduled. Crazy to think that between you and I, you're the one that had to cancel because of a power outage due to a snowstorm in Seattle, and here I am in Kingston, and we're good to go.
Well, and if I recall, you had some travel or something too, so it was kind of worked out well.
Yeah, no, for sure, it all worked out well. So Ron, the first thing I like to do with all my guests is get them to give a little brief background about themselves, who they are, where they come from, and basically how they got into this whole leadership journey in the first place. And then we'll dive into a real conversation from there.
Sure. So yeah, my firm Navalent has been around for about 14 years now. I've been in this career for about 30 years working with leaders. And I think, since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by the organizing human endeavor. People bringing people together to try and do something they couldn't do on their own. And whether it was, organizing a fundraiser at school or organizing a local stickball game, I wanted to be the one that sort of brought that stuff together. And though I didn't always want to be the leader, I loved helping leaders be better. So I spent years consulting to the U.S. military and State Department in Europe. And then I came back from there and started working in the private sector and found my way alongside leaders in a variety of settings, and have enjoyed the opportunity to watch them and their aspirations and their organizations get better. So about 14 years ago, a couple of friends and I launched off onto our own and started Navalent. So we get to do it the way we want to do it.
That's awesome. It's funny. We kind of have similar backgrounds, and it was basically when I was a kid, I kicked off my leadership journey as well in a very similar way. But I always wanted to be the guy in charge for whatever reason. That was always my thing. I always aimed to be the guy in charge, and it kind of drove me nuts when I wasn't that guy. But nonetheless, it's not necessarily always about being the person who's in charge. I've learned that in the past 20 odd years of my leadership journey. So no, for sure, it's awesome. So today we're going to be talking about the middle management, the people in those middle management roles and positions and middle leadership roles, as I like to refer to it as, not management, and the audience gets that, and how they can make that, that step, right? So how can they make that next step up to that next level? And no doubt you've come across this in your time, and I'm sure it's part of your consulting business. So how can really new leaders? Let's not even get to people who are in middle management, the middle range yet, but people who are entering and have those aspirations to be in the C-suite one day or be in the president corner office one day. So how can they best prepare themselves to start making that journey?
Well, early would be my first answer. We for our book, Rising to Power, we studied over 2,700 leaders in our research over a 10-year longitudinal period to understand. We've known for 20 years, Scott, that more than half the leaders attempting that rise fail in their first 18 months. And we wanted to understand why that was. It became pretty personal when it started to be people we were helping, not making the leap. So we dug deep. I wanted to find out why. First of all, why have we been okay with the fact that half of them tank in under 18 months? I think recruiters love it because it's an annuity for them, but for everybody else, the carnage behind their careers and their families and the lost opportunities in organizations, it's a horrific, and we thought we can do better. And what the exciting part of the research showed us was, all the landmines that organizations put in the way of these leaders are preventable. But even more fundamentally, we were able to isolate what were the other half doing that weren't failing. What were the people who were sticking the landing on the way up and thriving at higher altitudes? How were they doing it? And we were able to isolate the factors that consistently predicted who would succeed and why. So I would tell you, as you're interviewing for jobs, as you're preparing yourself to think about, first of all, be clear why. Because if you want to lead it at broader purchase, you will suffer. It's a sacrificial job. It's not, if you're all attracted to the perk, what you believe to be the perks or the money or the power, leadership's not for you. You have to want to sacrifice and be blamed for everything that goes wrong and never get credit for anything that goes right, and really make a difference using the power that comes with those roles. So if that's what you want, then proceed cautiously. But as you're rising up, be aware that you have to prepare yourself at every altitude. Don't wait till you get to the new summit to find out that you have altitude sickness and can't breathe. Here's a simple example. If you find yourself in an interview process for your first director job or your first VP job, and you hear the person interviewing you looking at your resume, the least reliable device we have to predict performance, asking you about your past and saying things like, wow, look at these great brands you built. That's what we need. Or, wow, look at these great sales numbers you've achieved with these great sales forces you built. That's what we need. Or, my gosh, you built these great technologies and apps for your company. We need that. If you hear somebody, in essence, inferring that you should repeat your past successes, run for the door.
Yeah. Because
you're being set up to fail. Because in essence, you'll think you have this mythical mandate to repeat those successes. You'll come in and start slapping on your recipe onto the organization without thinking about the context you're doing it in. We've all seen this movie 100 times. Leaders show up from up or out, and they start trying to repeat, reach back for their toolkit and replicate what they've done before in a context that's completely different. So if someone's looking for a quick win and looking to leverage it on your back, you don't want that job. Now, let's assume you stick the landing. Let's assume you arrive into a bigger job. There were 4 things that we found that leaders who stuck the landing at the top did that you can start learning now. Don't wait till you have a bigger job to learn these. But the first one was context. Be curious. Look around and find out, why are things the way they are? What's happening outside your industry or your market? What's happening inside your organization? And why is it happening? Learn to read the tea leaves. Learn to be curious and don't just have answers. Don't be the answer ATM as a leader, but learn to be the one that has better questions. Learn to wonder why problems have occurred. Learn to connect dots about insights about how to solve problems or go after opportunities. Don't just do things mindlessly. The second was breadth. So the real kicker in organizations is that as you get higher up in them, the fragmentation feels more intense, right? Mm-hmm. Organizations are sums of their parts. So you have border wars at the department level seams or the regional seams. You have internal competition and rivalry. But as you get higher in an organization, your job is to stitch those seams. Your job is to create cohesion and see how the pieces fit together. If you grow up through a finance function, you don't have the luxury of seeing the world economically anymore. If you grew up in a marketing silo, you don't have the luxury of seeing the world through consumers anymore. So you have to start to learn to see a bigger set of pieces and how they fit together. And your job is to bring those pieces together and create cohesion and see the whole, not just the parts. The third was choice. You're going to have to make harder decisions with less information, less reliable information, with longer time horizons and more ambiguity. And you have to be comfortable saying no. Too many leaders get to those perches and they want to buy loyalty from people. They want to win people over and win popularity. And they dole out way too many yeses. And they're not comfortable disappointing people. But when you get higher up in an organization, leadership is the ability to disappoint people at a rate they can absorb. And you need to be able to do that and narrow the focus of people and say no to even great ideas so that the best ideas can prevail, especially the ones you've already committed to. And lastly, it's connection. How do you build relationships? The people who were successful in our study were the ones that prioritized their relationships according to the ones they could help succeed. They didn't prioritize work according to who they needed stuff from, but who they could give stuff to. So whose agenda is on your radar? Who are you helping to be successful? Who are you developing? Every organization has these leaders. They're the ones everybody wants to be around. Everybody wants to work for them. You know that if you're in their presence, you're going to learn and you're going to get better. And that's the leader you got to strive to be. So context, breadth, choice, connection, those are the four, all of them hard. And the kicker was this, the leaders who stuck the landing did all four well. So 3 out of 4 gets you on the B team. And it's kind of cruel. My research team did 99 different regression analyses because I kept wanting to come back and say 3 is good enough, or can we have 2 and then get better at 2? But no matter how we cut the data up, if you didn't have all 4, you didn't win. The great news is you can learn all 4 of those things early, like yesterday. If you start waiting till you're in a bigger job to start building those muscles, that's not going to go well.
No, there's so many great points in there, and I don't think I disagree with any of them. And the one thing I definitely want to highlight is that whole context piece, and it's probably one of my golden rituals or whatever. Whenever I take over in a new organization, being Canadian military, I move every 2 years, right? Change jobs every 2 years, but I still have the same process. And the biggest thing is I walk into a job and I never make any changes for at least 3 to 4 months.
Yep.
Why? Because I have no idea why things are the way they are, and if I feel like they're wrong, that's fine. But why are they necessarily wrong? I may not know why. And then all of a sudden, as I step back and, analyze it and look at it holistically, as you said, the whole organization complete, you start realizing, oh, it's actually not wrong, or it's that way for this reason. And I actually don't have control over the reason why it's that way. So you know what? I'm not going to worry about it or try to influence it anyway. So no, I definitely like that. And I feel that what I refer to as the leadership cycle, that's the first step, and it's crucial because it's going to set you up for either success or failure down the line. So it's awesome.
Well, and I think, how many leaders enter these roles with the similar aspirations? I'm just going to listen and learn for 90 days. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go on a listening tour.
It's so hard.
Well, then 3 weeks in, someone says, where's your 90-day plan? And out goes the listening tour, and, task forces are formed and dust is being kicked up and they give up. And there's nothing that's going to happen in the first 3 or 4 months that you can do effectively anyway. So while you have the halo effect on, while people expect you not to know much, enjoy being dumb and enjoy the luxury about not having to have answers and being able to ask dumb questions, because that's going to go away, and you won't get those fresh eyes again.
Absolutely. So to combat that, because you know what, I'll fully admit I am that guy. I'll be like, hey, I'm not going to touch anything. And then all of a sudden, like, ooh, I want to change this, want to change that, I want to do this, want to do that. So to combat that, I actually give 2 of my closest subordinates what I refer to as veto power for 3 months. And then
all right.
And basically, it's for them to walk in, hold the mirror up, say, hey, you told me that you're not going to change anything and I can call you out on it. I'm calling you out, boss, because during the last meeting you said you were going to do this. I'm like, oh, dang. Right. And then it's twofold because now I got to go against my own, what I said myself. And then it's like, I don't want to ever do that as a leader. So
have you ever out-vetoed a veto?
Only because the criteria is if I'm told to change something, then obviously you can't veto what the boss says, right? But if it's my own thought and my own decision to change something, then the guys have the right to veto me. The guys or gals, because it's been gals in the past too. So that's just for the audience. That's just one practical way to how I go about and trying to basically keep myself in check, right?
Well, I think the reality is that whatever assumptions you're using to, now obviously sometimes leaders enter in a crisis and the world's on fire and you don't have the luxury of,
a totally different scenario and totally different thing in my mind.
Unless the world's on fire, don't put it on fire by kicking up dust that doesn't need to be kicked up. You're better off taking time to learn, because the reality is the organization has as much to change in you as you have to change in it. You have to adapt, and you can't go native, right? You got to stay distant enough so you can be fresh, but you can't not adapt who you are in some form for your ideas to actually stick. And in order for people to want to adopt your ideas, they have to know you learned who they were first. Yeah,
this is great. So just to summarize that, what I feel that's coming out of this conversation with you right now, some of the best advice for the people out there. And if you're not in a leadership role, you're listening to this podcast to develop your leadership skills before you even necessarily get into that role. Maybe you're looking into getting in a leadership role soon, or it's on the horizon. First off, good for you. Most people don't do that. But, the way I hear it from you is that basically as soon as you get into those roles, start exercising, that type of leadership style. And so that it's not new to you when you get into that senior level, right? Looking at your organization holistically, taking your time, getting to know, the broader, world that you're working and operating out of, all those, the 4 steps that you placed on. Is that fair?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and to learn breadth, just start crossing borders in your organization. Just, somebody in some department, is having their life made miserable by something you're doing.
Absolutely.
Go find out who they are and how to fix it. Go see the world through someone else's shoes, because you're part of a bigger story. But when you're down lower in the organization, your view is narrower. Broaden get your peripheral vision out wider to be able to see whose work am I relying on? Do they know what I need from them? And who's relying on me that I could be letting down? Go see how the pieces fit together. Get involved in governance in your organization. Get involved in the way choices and decisions are made. Get involved in looking at data analytics and see who's sitting at what tables. Ask to come to meetings and observe. Ask to go participate in the governing processes so that you can see how resources are allocated, how priorities are set or changed. And right now, think about the 10 people in your organization who are most important for your success, and what can you do to help them be successful? How can you go make their life, their development, their agenda better, and go figure out how to prioritize that. I have one guy I worked with. He had 3 questions. He'd ask everybody he led. He would say, how can I be a better colleague to you? What are you working on these days that's really important to the organization? And then lastly, he'd say, how can I help you with that one thing? And he asked everybody those questions, and people came to know him as the guy who had everybody's back. And of course, he's a brilliant, talented leader who's got a lot of loyalty and has risen up pretty far in his organization.
No, it's awesome. So let's change gears a little bit here. So we've been talking about a lot about new leaders and basically setting their foundation for success down the line. How are those people who find themselves right now in middle management, middle leadership roles? Is there anything different that they should be doing? Let's say they haven't been actually thinking about this in the past. Now they're like, oh God, maybe I should be getting myself prepared. I do want to make the next step forward. Is there anything that they should be doing in particular, or anything different?
Well, I think that, if you're in that director level role, part of the challenge for you is feeling the compression of decisions, right? So you have people above you playing too low, you're forcing you down to play too low. If you have not let go of the work you were doing in the last job, make sure that you've let go. If people are feeling you meddling in their shorts, and you've justified it as, well, they're not ready to let go, and I'm still training them, and recognize that you've not learned to be gratified by the work in the middle, which is coordinating work. At the top you have strategic work that's minding the store of the future. At the bottom, you have operational work that's executional. But in the middle, you have coordinating work that translates that strategy into executional work. And so peripheral vision is most important for you because you're coordinating laterally. You're taking the pieces from sales, marketing, and innovation. You're taking the pieces from supply chain operations and R&D, and you're creating the executable work with them. So you more than anybody, you have to have breadth. You have to be able to see laterally. And if you're reinforcing the silos and making it difficult to coordinate, and decisions are having to come up through you and up to your boss and then down through you again, you're impeding the organization. You're not helping it to operate well because you're entrenching a vertical orientation when the fact is at your level, at a direct level, you got to really be horizontal.
Yeah. And I personally would add that I think this is where I would say relationships are even more powerful at this point because you have such impact on the organization that you're working for.
Your peers are certainly a big part of your life. How you manage up is a big deal because you're trying to keep them up there in their own stratosphere. And then how you develop others, how you're seen as developing others and leading those you lead is what people are going to use to gauge whether or not you can lead at a bigger level.
Yeah. My last job, I was commanding 200 people, and my peers, at my rank level, we were a tight knit crew. It was probably one of the best teams I've ever worked with, and in particular, one individual, who had roughly the same size of organization that this individual was commanding as well, and I would say because of our relationship, the whole organization as a whole was actually better off just due to the relationship that myself and the whole crew, but in particular this one individual that we had, and we both felt it and we could see it, and everybody could see it. And most of the time, the senior leadership didn't need to get involved because they knew it was already handled at our, within this organization, the middle stratosphere. So
yeah.
It's all sound advice for sure. So how can people prepare themselves for, you hit on the interview a little bit there earlier, and I'd like to go boomerang back to that. What advice do you have for someone who's getting prepared for that interview? Because you said, if they're asking you about your past, basically run away. And I have my views on this as well, what people should be listening for, looking for, and all this, but I definitely would like to get your touch on that whole interview process and some basically practical advice for the audience out there who are interviewing for these senior level jobs.
You want to make sure you got your stories, right? You're going to be asked for tell me a time when kinds of questions, and you've got to have a stable of great stories of impact, that you've had on the places you've led, and position your stories more strategically. Position how it is. Whatever it was you accomplished contributed to the broader mission of the organization. Talk about the bigger picture. Don't just talk about the XYZ problem you solve, but talk about why that was important to a broader swath of the organization. Try and position everything you do in a bigger story. And also have great questions, right? Make sure that you're not just being grilled and offering inspiring stories, but make sure you're hiring your next boss, and make sure you hire well. Make sure you know what you want in a leader. At a senior level, make sure you know how you want to learn and grow, and make sure you know what you don't want in a boss, because you may hire a bad boss.
That's a very interesting way to put it. You may be hiring a bad boss, and the audience out there know I'm all up arms against what I refer to as the bosses out there, i.e. the people who just basically run their organizations, run ragged, and not care about their people. Just ultimately care about themselves. So
yeah,
I like that. Oh my. So Ron, this has been a pretty interesting conversation. I got a few more questions before we start to wind down here. And really probably one of the last ones I'm thinking is, as people get settled in and they start to, get in that senior role, and eventually, we all leave our organizations. So what advice would you have for people once they, get to that senior level about preparing to move on, whatever that moving on would be in the end?
Well, I would certainly hope, if you're going to enter the stratosphere of an organization you're in, you should try and do it in a way that isn't, don't have to leave. It's very difficult to go someplace new at the top. Entering from the outside at high levels is a much higher risk endeavor. So if you really aspire to lead at a senior level, try and get to the organization in which you want to do it in the middle, and learn and have the cover of the middle before you get up there. Because once you're at a senior level in an organization, the one thing that most leaders don't anticipate is your life's now on the Jumbotron. You have a megaphone strapped to your mouth 24/7. Everything you do is amplified and misinterpreted. There are multiple versions of you, and it's a much more politicized set of waters to swim in. And so it's very difficult to enter a brand new world at that level and deal with all that. So if you have the luxury of rising up within an organization that you want to lead in, do that, because moving on from a top to a top, that's just it's a whole other level of difficulty, and the failure rate's even higher. So avoid it if you can.
That's awesome. That's I definitely can see that for sure. Well, Ron, this has been a great conversation for sure, and it definitely truly enjoyed having you on the show here. I got one last question for you, which I ask all my guests, and that is to you, Ron. What makes a great leader?
Well, for starters, followers.
Yeah, it's kind of a prerequisite.
And beyond breadth, context, choice, and connection, you have to care. You have to really care about the people you lead, and have tangible ways of letting them know that. If you don't know whether or not your intentions and your impact are matching, you're in some dangerous territory. So you have to have a way to calibrate whether or not your intentions to care. First of all, make sure you have intentions to care. And then if you do, make sure the impact you're having matches those intentions. Otherwise, you're flying without radar.
No, it's definitely solid words there for sure. Well, it's been great. As I said, this has been a great conversation. At this time, I'd like to flip the mic over to you and give yourself a shameless plug. Where can people find you, the resources, your website, your TEDx talk, books, all of the above? Have at it.
Well, it'd be fun to stay in touch. You can come to our website at Navalent, Navalent.com, and we've got lots of videos, and we have a free quarterly magazine on all the stuff on leadership you can download. You can find the research to Rising to Power on the website there. We have a free ebook on leading change. So if you have a transformation in front of you have to spearhead, come to navalent.com/transformation, and you can download a free ebook there and see our playbook for it. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Ron Carucci and also on LinkedIn. So let's stay in touch.
Awesome. For the audience up there, as always, it's easy for you guys. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/6969, and all the links are there in the show notes. Again, Ron, it's been a super pleasure having you on the show, man.
Scott, thanks for having me.
No, for sure. And we'll definitely be in touch. Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that show there with Ron and I. I thought it was great. It's definitely a different perspective that you don't necessarily get all the time, right? We don't necessarily always talk about how to go about getting promoted and what you need to do to move up the organizational leadership ladder. So if you found that useful and you enjoy the show and you enjoy all things moving forward leadership, then keep in mind R²S², will you? Rate and review the show so that other people can learn about it. Share this episode with someone who you think it might be useful. Someone who's getting ready to make that leap. Someone who's preparing themselves to move up in their organizational ladder. And then finally subscribe by going movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And you can find all your favorite types of podcast players there, whether that is iTunes, Apple Podcasts now. Subscribe on Android, which will open up whatever podcast app you use, Google Play, and good old RSS feed, which, yes, some people still use out there. Either way, subscribe to the show so that you don't miss a single episode. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your dedication to the show. I thank you for your time, for listening to myself and my guests. And most importantly, I thank you for your support. So until next time, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care now.